Good morning and welcome to an introduction to the book of Ezekiel as we journey through the Bible in a year. Ezekiel is probably the last of the big prophets that we're kind of looking at as we move through the Bible. We're moving into some kind of minor prophets. I think Daniel may be kind of clinging on the coattails of the big prophets there, but certainly the big three of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel taking up kind of big chunks of space in the scriptures. And again, around this sort of time period of the exile to Babylon, that's what we see here in the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel was one of Jeremiah's disciples, and so again there's some kind of overlap there. And the Babylonians had taken 10,000 or so Jewish people prisoner, from the young king to the crack troops, the nobility, including this young priest Ezekiel, who was taken into exile. And for 5 years they're there in exile in Babylon, which is modern day Iraq. And they're devastated, and the country has been decimated, and back in Jerusalem it's being ruled by a kind of puppet king who is ruling things on behalf of Babylon. And for another 7 years after they've been taken hostage, he's ruling there. But then there's a revolt, and in the end the city is completely destroyed. The temple is ransacked and burnt down, and the hope that the exiles have been living for, which was that one day we're going to get to go back, one day we can be at home, all of this will be over. That dream was shattered. And we have some of that expressed in the book of Ezekiel, some of some really uncanny, in an age before TV and the internet and newspapers and anything like that, some really canny political and global commentary on the way in which the nations of that time and the nations of the world fitted together and worked, and so on. And we have these amazing visions in Ezekiel. Also, we have these incredible periods of time where Ezekiel doesn't speak for 6 years. As far as we know, doesn't speak at all for 6 years until the Lord gives him the message that he is to speak to the people. But at the beginning of Ezekiel, in chapter 1, we have this extraordinary vision of the glory of God. Extraordinary vision that, as you read this first chapter, will be an amazing thing to kind of read. And I'll pick it up from verse 25 of chapter 1 in Ezekiel. And it says this: having seen this amazing vision of the glory of the Lord appearing like a cloud on the horizon and coming, and the wind and these heavenly beings that are around the throne and so on. And then verse 25 says this: there came a voice from above the vault over their heads as they stood with their wings lowered. And above the vault of their heads was what looked like a throne of lapis lazuli. And high above the throne was the figure of that like a man. And I saw what appeared from his waist up to be like glowing metal, as if full of fire. And there was from there down looked like fire. And there was a brilliant light that surrounded him, like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day. So was the radiance around him. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell face down. What an amazing picture. An amazing picture which kind of tells us that rather than God being this distant God far off somewhere in a temple, kind of housebound, locked down, and the hope one day we'll return and we can get to be with God, because this is where God is, in this house, and he's nowhere else. That God is a God who is mobile. They're moving towards them where they are in this vision. God is a God who is mobile, is a God who's personal. not far off, not stuck away in some temple hundreds and hundreds of miles away. That he's a God who's personal, that he reveals himself in that sense. He's a physical person to know in that sense, even if the physicalness in that sense is difficult to nail down. But God can be known personally. He can communicate personally to people, and that God is supernatural. That's the other thing that's there. This whole scene is this supernatural event that takes place with the worship of these living creatures, to the worship of Ezekiel falling down, to the appearance and the wonderful line. I love that line, like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, so was the radiance around him. And that this was not even the most radiantness of God. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. That's the incredible thing. It was like, this is something like the appearance of the likeness of the glory of God. The God in reality is so much more, so much greater, so much bigger, so much more beautiful, so much more holy and majestic and powerful than we could ever understand, that we could ever get our heads around. And this is not, some vague picture. This is the genius of a visionary trying to imagine that which is unimaginable. And that's what Ezekiel's doing here. He's trying to communicate to people with this genius vision that he has, something which he can't even begin to describe and understand, but knows that God is amazing and wonderful. And so the people who are in exile, and their hope of going home is gone, their identity is gone, and everything like that, feel like this is the end for us. We're gone. The people of God have gone. Our nation is gone. We've got nothing left, no identity. And yet another vision comes later in Ezekiel chapter 37. You might be familiar with this one, the valley of the dry bones. And this wonderful bit where Ezekiel is in this valley and there's a bunch of bones there, and God asks the question, Son of man, can these bones live? And Ezekiel says, well, only you, O Lord, know. And he says, prophesy to these bones, prophesy that the breath of God will come, and the bones then come together in this vision, and then they're there sort of physically as an army of bones and flesh and skin, and then can these bones live? And prophesy to the breath, because there was no breath in them, no spirit in them. Remember, in Hebrew that breath and wind and spirit are all interchangeable, all part of the same word, ruach, and that's the word that is used here. So there's no spirit in them, no breath, no wind. And so Ezekiel calls down the spirit, the breath, and it enters them, and they became alive. And this is then what we read, verse 10 of Ezekiel chapter 37. So I prophesied as he commanded me, a breath entered them, and they came to life and stood on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They say, our bones have dried up and our hope is gone, we are cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says, my people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. And so you've got this message to a people who felt that there was nothing left for them, who felt that they were dead and dry and dusty and discarded upon the wasteland of their history. And God says, say this message to you, that I am going to raise you up from your graves, and I'm going to lead you to the place and the home that I have for you. And what is that message for us today then, as we read that, as we get an unexpected glimpse of the glory of God, through Ezekiel's visions, as we have a sense in which God is so much bigger, so much better, more holy, awesome, powerful, splendid than we could ever understand, ever express in 1,000 hymns or poetry or writing or what have you. And that God says to us, even in the times where we feel desolate and dry and dusty and discarded, I am going to raise you up and I'm going to take you to the place that I've created for you. And so that's my prayer for you as you read these words, that you might know God lifting you from the grave of your desolation and your dryness, if that's you today, and that he might take you forward to the place that he has for you. It's an amazing book, this book of Ezekiel. We're going to be looking at it for a couple of weeks, certainly in our reading. So I pray that you might be blessed thoroughly as you explore these words together. God bless you.